Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Think Thursdays webinar series. I'm Don Lupo, Director of Marketing with ThinkLA. We're so glad you can join us today. I know we have a few more people joining us as we go. A few announcements before we begin. Please check our website at thinkla.org for upcoming webinars, events, and information about membership. And also, please be sure to sign up for our newsletter for great articles and resources and the latest news from our members. I want to encourage everyone to donate to Ad Relief at adrelief.org. They are an incredible organization which helps the advertising, marketing, and media community in times of crisis. Please go to adrelief.org for more information. We are very fortunate to have Kirk Souder and Licia with us today. Kirk is co-founder of ENSO, whose mission is to create positive impact at scale through cultural initiatives with visionary brands and through impact coaching with visionary leaders, including entire product design divisions of Fortune 500 companies. Prior to deep education and training in professional coaching, Kirk's business leadership spanned 25 years of successful enterprises. He's held roles as Chief Creative Officer and President CEO of agencies, founder of Vanguard Creative Shops, and he's built award-winning creative cultures in New York, DC, Los Angeles, and Shanghai. He is co-author with Licia of the book The Soul Purpose Method, and co-facilitates Soul Purpose workshops with Licia for leaders from around the globe. Licia is a licensed marriage and family therapist and transformation coach. She has a master's degree in counseling, psychology, and certifications in soul-centered leadership and soul-centered professional coaching. In Licia's private practice, she works with individuals and groups in clarifying, creating, and living an inspired and inspiring life. Licia has served at the University of Santa Monica as faculty for the past 15 years in their soul-centered living master's programs. In addition to her faculty role, she served as their managing director, providing leadership, coaching, and oversight to a variety of the university's projects and departments. And some of her clients have included Microsoft, American Express, NBC, and more. We are so grateful that you are both here today. Kirk and Licia, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, thank you so much, Don. Yeah, I guess I'm starting, just to kind of back up something Don was talking about. I feel a lot of gratitude and just good feelings of being here today because, my background is from the agency business as a creative, and particularly here in LA, agencies like Ground Zero and Shy, Stein Robert, and places like that were part of my beginnings. And now to be able to come back and serve in this way is such a privilege. Today we're going to be covering kind of three different areas. Licia and I are going to be first kind of bring you this principle of preference to purpose that we've found been so valuable, both in our own lives and our coaching with individuals and the workshops that we've been doing called Soul Purpose here in New York and looks like soon to be Europe. And so to be able to bring that to this community at this time when so much is seemingly up in the air and so many of our preferences of what we thought were going to happen, it turns out, we have to pivot. And the tool we're going to be talking about today is all about that. So we're going to be doing that. And then we're going to invite you into a process where you're going to actually work the very steps that we use with our clients and in the workshops to help people learn this kind of, we call it an inner hack in terms of, getting us in contact with innovation and creativity and so on. And then at the end, we're going to have a space for actual questions and coaching and however you want, to be best served having heard what you did and work the process that you did. So have I missed anything, Licia, before we get into the main frame of what we're doing?
Well, I would just add to that. No, you're doing great, Kirk. I would add to that also that I'm just absolutely delighted to be working with you all. It's so wonderful to work with leaders and creatives because we really can make such a profound difference. And I would say one thing that may be a little different in this workshop, we were talking to Don before about some of the different series that they have so wonderfully offered right now in terms of streamed events. this offering today, this event, is going to be a little different in that it's experiential rather than it's not just about teaching you some education. It's really about supporting you and having an experience that confirms or validates that education itself. So we just really invite you. We've worked really with thousands of people around the world, and what we have found is really the best way to get the most out of an event like this, out of this type of work, is to fully participate. And so we just really encourage you to do that, and including, if you can, to actually turn your cameras on. Not only will that support you in being present to the material and and the experience of it, it also actually really supports us because we can see your lovely faces, and we will really be working interactively with you all. So that will be very, very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, Licia.
Sure.
So for me, one of the best setups for what we're talking about today is a personal experience that I had ages before we even named this principle. It was back literally in the Stone Ages when I was a freshman in college. And I was a freshman in college. I was in my first semester. And at the end of that semester, I pretty much decided that college was not for me. And then I had the terrifying prospect ahead of me of having to sit down with my parents and tell them that my plan was going to be to become a ski bum. That was what I really liked. I was going to go out west, and I kind of grew up in Switzerland. I had my certificates, and I was going to be like ski patrol during the day, bartend at night. Life was going to be perfect. And I didn't expect them to understand that right away, but nonetheless, I had decided that, and I was really looking forward to that being my life. And as would happen, about a week before I'm to have that discussion, I'm coming out of surgery from what was thought to be a ski-related injury. And two doctors in white coats came into my hospital room and said, actually, we removed a very large tumor called sarcoma, and it's an aggressive tumor. And people with this type of tumor and this size can expect to live between 1.5 to 36 months. And by the way, there's not going to be any skiing because we have to do some radical surgery in your leg just to keep it there for the time you have left. And so all of a sudden, everything I had ever thought of and dreamt of in terms of what was going to be my life, what was coming up next, was suddenly just wiped off the table. And, not too different, I think, from what a lot of people are experiencing with COVID right now in terms of that kind of upheaval of life, and more through a force function than by choice, which is what we're going to be talking about today. I found myself needing to, of course, switch all gears. And given kind of the prognosis I had, I said, I don't have to be practical. I'm just going to kind of go into art in school from physics, which was my previous major. And art led me to visual communications, which led me to advertising art direction, which led me into New York City, into this amazing field that is, to me, still one of the funnest fields in the world, where I, met my wife in my first job, who's become my soulmate for 29 years as of a week ago. 2 amazing kids, an amazing career where I've gotten to hang out with people like Michael Jordan and Barack Obama. And so as I look back and connect the dots, I see that what is my preference isn't necessarily always like what is my calling and purpose. And what we're going to be talking about today is, wouldn't it be great if it didn't require the force functions of cancer or COVID or whatever it is where we have to shift, but if we could harness this as a tool for us that enables us to say, okay, this is a preference I have, but what if there's something greater out there for me? What if there's something that is actually more aligned with why I'm here? And so that's what we're going to be bringing forward today. That's the practice. And to really narrow it down to 3 simple things that it helps. It will remove us from any stuckness that we have. It will enable us to create on a whole different level. So where we were creating on a second or third gear, we'll be creating on a fourth gear in terms of possibility. And also it moves us into this paradigm of co-creation. That is to really be open, 360 degrees all around us, above us and below us, in terms of getting that feedback and that information that helps us go bigger than where we're going to go.
So we're going to, I mentioned that this is experiential, so we're going to actually start with asking you, if there was one word that would describe how you're feeling about this time, what would that word be? And if you can just chat it, type the word in chat, we would love to see kind of where you all are at right now in terms of your life and your experience in these COVID times. Curious, resilient, useful, optimistic, scattered. I can appreciate that one. Contemplative, yes. Unsure, optimistic, uncertainty, juggling, yes, indeed. Uncertain, calm, excellent. So really a wide variety of experiences. I think we all can probably relate to most of the one words that you all shared. I see a lot of uncertain and a lot of unsure, for sure, that we can appreciate that. And then also, yes, that idea that, wow, there may be something more. There may be something even better. So great, thank you. And new mom surrendered. Congratulations. And we are with you, new mom. Oh my gosh. That is a journey in and of itself, a huge journey. So thank you for participating in that. So, what all of that really speaks to is that if I could summarize all of that, I would say, and I think you might agree, that we are in an extraordinary moment in history. I mean, this has never happened before. I was taking a walk with my husband yesterday, and I said, if somebody had told me that something could happen on a global scale that would immediately change all of our behaviors and lifestyle within a matter of a few weeks, I would have said, outside of a cataclysmic like natural disaster or something on that grand of a scale, that couldn't have happened. And yet here we are. We're in this historic moment. And the thing about this that some of your words really speak to is that this moment also presents a very powerful opening to evolve for our own evolution and our both personally and professionally. And how can we show up in new ways to serve ourselves, serve our communities, and serve our business and industry? So why is that? Well, Kirk mentioned this before in his story of himself. We are in an experience where many of our preferences that we were planning on, that we were living in, that we were planning for, have just been wiped off the table. And so that kind of collective clean slate offers us, in essence, a clearer playing field, because as we clear preferences, we also clear a lot of distractions, a lot of static, metaphorically, on the line. So we have an even greater ability to distinguish between our preferences and our enduring purpose. We're going to talk a lot about what that actually means, what those two words mean, and hopefully it will be of service to you. We can really, the thing about preference and purpose is ultimately we can utilize both of them to really create magnificent realities for ourselves and in our work. And basically the through line of this is really that it's a story about moving from attachment to a way or an outcome to much greater possibilities. So the possibilities that we wouldn't have been able to think of And if we had stayed attached, if we had stayed locked into that preference. And so it really does have tremendous implications to professionally to our industry right now, because just as we are being called forward to shift in our own selves, so is this industry and how we go about serving our communities.
Yeah, and I can speak a little bit more about those opportunities for the industry, because I'm sure everyone on this Zoom is well aware that the industry, even before COVID, was facing some challenges in that our basic currency of creativity and innovation, has slowly kind of being, creeped out both to the client side, to technology, to algorithms. And so there was already an impetus for reinvention. And what we're going to be bringing forward today, we really hope is used as a tool for that. And then there's this other aspect I think that COVID has really unearthed, which is if you watch, television now, or you're in your feeds, you'll notice that there's kind of two different kinds of brands that are emerging out of this. There are the brands that are continuing just to say things, and then there are the brands that are now actually doing things. They're seeing their main kind of operation in the world is to actually respond, like a responder, respond to what's happening, and to be in service to it, and to actually have that be to go beyond impressions and go into impact. And so for us to be able, as people in the industry, to be able to utilize this tool of, well, I understand kind of how it was and what my preferences are, but maybe this is an opportunity for me not to just lift myself, my company, my agency, my clients, but also the industry into a new thing that we might be doing and performing in the world. So there's an exciting opportunity in that. And it's important to be aware, though, and this is what we're going to be working on today, that we can have that kind of aspiration, but yet come across something inside of us that is still, well, wait a second, I'm really kind of comfortable with things, and this is kind of going a little bit out of my comfort zone. And first of all, that is so normal. That is the work of our egos trying to protect us and keep us safe, and that's okay. But at the same time, it is a little bit of a barrier that can keep us from where we're really meant to be alive. And we kind of see it on the news now. We can see the ego creeping in the sense of the term now is when we get back to the new normal. Now, look at those words, the new normal. There's an insidious thing that's gone on there, which is to say, it's going to be maybe new, but let's still make it kind of normal so that we're all still kind of comfortable with it in a way, even though 6 months ago we were complaining about it everywhere about how things were. Still, let's kind of have it be the new normal. And what we're going to be bringing forward today is what if we could create a new better? What if we could take the circumstances and see how that might be dashing our preference, and from that have a tool that lets us move into a new better, lets us create a new better. So that is the core of what the basic principles and tools Licia and I are going to be talking about today.
So really the first step in understanding this approach is to really understand the difference of what we mean by preference and purpose, and underlying that, what aspects in our consciousness govern each of those. And this is very exciting work for us because it's something that most people on the planet are not aware of. But once you understand the dynamics and how they work, it really opens up a whole other level of opportunity. So we're excited to be able to share this with you right now. So we're going to start with preference. And Kirk mentioned this actually just a moment ago. Preference resides in the realm of the ego. Now, when we talk about the ego, we're not talking about a word that is synonymous with arrogant. We're not saying egotistical. We're really talking about the psychological term of the ego, which means the mental and emotional realms of our personality. So a key to know about the ego is that its main role is to keep us safe in this physical world reality. And it does this 24/7. It does a great job of this. And how it does it is by keeping us in our comfort zone, which we're all very familiar with that term. You'll see why that dynamic is so important in just a minute. So as we enter our creation mode, what we're doing is we are centering, we come up with a purpose or an objective that we want to solve. Now, right at that point, there's not form yet to it, there's just kind of a goal or an objective. So the idea of at that point is that we're trying to bring forward something into the world, whatever that may be. Now, at this point, there is a gap between our desire to fulfill that purpose and the actual fulfillment of it. And that gap creates a type of tension that the ego cannot stand. Can you relate to that? Like, have you been in the creative process where you're kind of like, I know I want this, but I haven't gotten to what that resolution is yet. So that kind of tension is something the ego cannot stand. Now, why is that? Because anything unknown in the ego's perception is potentially threatening. So remember, the ego's job is to keep us safe. So if it's starting to have warning bells, and that creative tension will ring those warning bells, it's going to do whatever it needs to do to get us back into comfort and our safety. So how does it go about doing that? And in an attempt to resolve that tension, the ego, and really especially the mind, which is a part of the ego, will go out pretty quickly and look at options and come back with a solution. And in its mind, that solution resolves that tension of that gap. Everybody following me so far? Does that make sense?
And Licia, if I could just add something.
Sure.
It goes even so much bigger than even kind of problem solution. What Licia's describing is even how we deal with uncertainty, broadly in our lives. That's really kind of what's happening. Is the ego does not like uncertainty or the unknown, right? It likes to know what's going to be happening in the future, so it will build an idea of what that is to give it the illusion of control, and that now I see what it is. Now I'm okay. And in the end, whether it's solving a problem or just thinking about our future, it's a fictional idea that we can hold on to. And what we're saying is there might be something so much bigger for us. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. Great ad, especially given, what we were talking about before about how much uncertainty there is right now. Right. I mean, this is a field day for the ego, what the kind of experience that we are dealing with right now. And in addition to kind of coming up with resolution, one of the common habits of the ego will be to perseverate or fixate on the problem as well. So those are some of the habits that it does in order to attempt to keep us safe in its perception. So now that the ego has found a solution in its perception that resolves that tension, it's going to latch onto that form, because again, that's the thing that's going to keep us safe, and it's doing its job. It's going to latch onto that form and it's going to pretend that's the form that it should look like, our solution. It should look like that way, and we should do it a certain way to resolve that solution. So it becomes very attached to the form. This gives it a sense that we're back in the comfort zone, and it also can get very attached to it being right, that solution is the right way. So that dynamic that I've just described is what we mean by preference. So when we're talking about preference, it's the ego's attempt to find a solution, its view of the vehicle and the achievement or solution to your objective, and its attachment to it. Now, Having said that, there's nothing wrong with preference. We are not trying to demonize the ego or even the preference itself. It's really fine to have a rough draft to begin to act on when you're in the creative process. Where we get into trouble is when we go from this is how it could look like to this is what it should look like, or even this is what it must look like. When we get into that level of attachment, then what we're really doing is we are closing down our opportunities to seeing other possibilities. So how many people, I'm going to raise my hand first, how many people have had that experience at some point in their creative process? Yes, thank you, Steph, for also raising your digital hand. You know, I mean, this is what we do as creatives, right? We go out, we come up with ideas, and we try not to be attached to them. But in essence, there's a part of us that goes, this is the best way, just do it this way. So we, you know, so that's kind of part of the process, and we'll be talking about how we can move beyond that in today's webinar.
Right, because in being so attached, it impedes us from seeing the greater possibility that might be all around us, and that's what we're going to be talking about. But before that, I want to talk about kind of the biology in a way of the reality of what Licia has been talking about. You know, where the ego mind is kind of located in the brain is on the left side, and it's the left side of the brain is what's called an analytical processor. That is, the function it does is it sees things, it labels them, and it files them away. And a lot of times when we are in the mode of preference and the energy is more of figuring stuff out, figuring the answer out, figuring out what has to happen, as opposed to kind of allowing and being open to what the greater possibility is, we're actually operating from that part of our mind. And so there is no true originality that can come from there, only permutations of things that we've already seen and encountered. And a lot of times the ego can trick itself by putting those permutations together in a certain way that looks different, but it's really just a regurgitation of what's already been, and therefore like an impediment to real creativity and innovation. You know, I was having a conversation a few weeks ago. I've had the good fortune to become friends with a woman named Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. Now, her name may sound familiar to you because she had a very famous TED Talk a few years ago where she came out with a human brain. She's a Harvard neuroanatomist who had a grand stroke. And because she was a neuroanatomist, she had the consciousness and the wherewithal to actually watch what was happening in her consciousness as it did. And so she wrote a book called My Stroke of Insight and so on. But anyway, we were having a conversation about this very thing, and that she was actually in the process of writing a book about this right now. And this is what she said to me, which I found fascinating. I'm going to quote her directly from our conversation. She said, "It's impossible for the part of our brain that can only label and archive that which has already happened to truly create. The real meaning of that word, to emerge with something new and non-derivative, that has to come from parts of the mind beyond the structures that hold the ego." And so that really is, you know, for us, some great science about what we're trying to talk about. Although science isn't our impetus, we love that there's a validation in neuroanatomy that says the part of our brain that loves to attach and hold on to preference is not the part of us where great originality comes from. And so the question is, how do we get there? And what is it?
So what is that part? Thank you, Kirk, for that. We call that part the authentic self. Now, some people call it the higher self. There's lots of names for it. Some people might call it the heart or the soul. But whatever the name of it is, it's a higher level of consciousness that exists in every single person. And that aspect of our consciousness is really our true inner visionary. That part of us is actually a wellspring of possibilities, of creativity, of innovation and inspiration. And so, whereas the ego, as Kirk's and really that conversation was so perfect, so synchronistic about really that the ego's analytical mind is the analytical mind, whereas the ego is attached to the form, as we've talked about before, the authentic self is connected to the deeper impulse or essence or calling or purpose. So that's its realm. We could almost say that it is form agnostic. It doesn't really get attached to any particular form of something. It's really in service to the why and to ultimately the result. So because of that, because of the freedom of that aspect of our consciousness, it will bring forward limitless possibilities that can achieve that why and that purpose that we are seeking. So as we return back to our themes of preference and purpose, preference resides, as we said, in the realm of the ego. And purpose resides in the realm of the authentic self. So said another way, preference is the outpicturing of form and purpose underlies form. So there may be many forms that can fulfill purpose. Now, why does this matter? When you are aware of both preference and purpose, as well as the aspects of your consciousness that govern each, the ego and authentic self, you then have greater freedom to open up to what is potentially an exponentially bigger manifestation of your objective by opening up to the aspect of your consciousness, the authentic self, that is the source of true creativity and innovation. And so you can just exponentially expand your possibilities when you are aware of and how to work each of those. Now, the big question, of course, would be, well, great, how do we do that? So here are the actual steps. You may want to take notes on this and write this down. Okay, so first, step one, we become aware that we have designated a preference. Second, we don't make that wrong, because the very act of judging ourselves or making it wrong is actually feeding the ego. It's actually identifying with the ego, which will even create more attachment to ego identification. And so it's not really serving us. So we don't make that preference wrong, but instead we hold it very lightly. Metaphorically, it's like the preference is in our hand, but it's an open hand. So we hold it lightly, and that allows us our deeper consciousness in partnership with the universe to drop other opportunities or other solutions into that open hand. So that's step two. Then in step three, we move into that deeper authentic self, that higher creative consciousness. We reconnect with our original purpose and then use that purpose as our North Star to clarify which solutions would best serve that purpose. So that's step three. And then step four, once we have clarified options that now we're going to what we like to call lean into. It's like a grand experiment. We're leaning into these options. Once we've clarified that, then we return to our ego, to that aspect of our consciousness to actualize and create next steps to manifest that solution. Because one of the other amazing aspects of the ego is that it's a real doer. It's the thing in our consciousness that goes out into this world and does the action necessary to fulfill on that purpose. So those are the 4 steps in a nutshell. Those are the 4 steps that we use. And as we begin to become facile in first recognizing when we're identified with our ego or identified with our authentic self, and then being able to use both of those aspects as they were designed to be used, that's when we really can create some profound transformation and creativity and innovation in our lives. And since most people, first and foremost, don't even recognize that they have an authentic self, they're fully identified with their ego, they stay stuck in what's really kind of this very constrained possibility because of the because of the ego being what it was designed to do, which is really to be in a very limited kind of constrained reality. So just having this awareness can really open up amazing possibilities.
Yeah, and just, I'm going to go on to some living examples of this so you have some reference points, but to what Licia just said, that confine can become so real that when you ask somebody, oh, is that your preference, what you're talking about? No, it's not my preference. It's the right way to do it. It's the only way to do it. And until you start to really inquire and let them see, actually, maybe it's not, do they actually understand that it's been a fictional construct that they're working in. So anyway, I want to go through two examples really quickly of people who really utilize this to great effect and impact. One is a woman named Kim Colmoni. She's the global head of product design at Mattel. She came to one of Licia and I's first soul purposes, where this is one of the principles we work with leaders with. And at the time, Kim came into the workshop really thinking that for her to really align with her purpose, which was she determined to help the marginalized and disenfranchised of the world, she was going to have to leave this Fortune 500 company and start some type of a nonprofit or something in order to make that real. And interestingly, there's someone on the Zoom, Susan from ThinkLA, who was in an actual trio, one of the processes we do with at Soul Purpose. She was there with Kim when Kim came on to the possibility of letting go of preference, that maybe the way that she could actually fulfill her purpose, if she let go of that preference, wasn't through a nonprofit or the typical ways you think to do that, but was actually through the business of a Fortune 500 company. That is, was to potentially stay there. And I know that because Kim went on to become a client of mine in coaching, there was a pivotal moment where her letting go of preference in terms of what she felt she should do to create her dream enabled her to see, instead of the paradigm of her working for this Fortune 500 company, she had a breakthrough where she said, whoa, wait a second, this Fortune 500 company and its hundreds of thousands of offices and people exists to fulfill my purpose. And if that's the case, then what does that mean in terms of what I can create? And what Kim went on to do was revolutionize Barbie, turn it from this, absurdly shaped, blonde woman to the most diversified doll line in the world. Every race, every ethnicity, every shape and size. That won Time Magazine's one of the top 100 inventions of the year that year. Didn't stop Kim. Kim then went on to create a line called Creatable World, which is the world's first gender-neutral, non-binary doll line. And I knew this was a big deal because it was one of those things that Kim really kept to herself, in the sense of, I really love to make that happen, but that would be impossible, for this world. But her power of her intention and the letting go of preference for purpose and allowing things to happen turn the tides around on that. And I can speak to this because Kim and I have written about this together. Otherwise, I would not share what goes on in the sacred container of a coaching arrangement. And finally, like this past year, Kim has brought out a line of disabled Barbies. In fact, I keep one on my desk to always let myself know the power of the work, and this Barbie in a wheelchair happened because a woman, came up to Kim and said, as Kim was leaving a toy fair, and said, you need to have girls represented like my girl is an African-American young disabled girl with cerebral palsy. And Kim took it to heart and actually took images and recreated that as a doll and brought that into the world. And lastly, in the past few months, Kim brought out a line of Barbies that meditate and teach children to meditate, because she had heard from focus groups that the number one thing parents were concerned about was anxiety in their children, right? So think about that. Think about if Kim had followed the should of, I need to go start a nonprofit. There's nothing wrong with that. That could have been awesome as well. But by letting that go and opening up and saying, but what about like what I'm in, like, and seeing how this giant company could serve a purpose, these things are coming out in the world and making tremendous impact. And by the way, making a big business difference for Mattel. The second example I want to bring up is a gentleman named Sam Polk, who owns a restaurant, kind of a restaurant service business in LA called Every Table, which is about providing healthy food to all neighborhoods, even the underserved neighborhoods. That's what he's really about. And he's created a business model where that becomes possible. Then COVID hits, and all of a sudden, no one is going to stores, everyone is in. And Sam faced that same moment. I know Sam is another person who I coach as well. And he saw, instead of being stagnated in, this is what my business is about, therefore that this is a moment of crisis and possibly failure, he said, but my purpose is to serve the people who really need healthy food, who can't. He went to the government and said, I have a commissary kitchen. Who needs food? Use us. And immediately had multiple contracts with the city to provide it to the elderly, to foster families, and so on. And in 3 months, he will have served over 1 million meals, which is more than he created in his natural business construct over the past 3 years. So this power, this tool that is to be able to hold our preference loosely and say, okay, I get that's the way I thought it should be, but maybe there's something more incredible out there. I'm going to be open to that. That's what creates these types of amazing evolutions and elevations of what we can create.
Cool. So now you're going to have an opportunity to learn and use a process that can take you on the same journey that both Kim and Sam have traveled and continue to travel. So I'll be guiding you through that process, and we want to encourage you to complete the questions as I ask them, because this process is really designed to support you in making that shift from the ego to the authentic self. So you may want to do this with pen and paper if you have like pen and paper handy. For those of you who like to type or do it digitally, that's fine too. You can also, use your laptop or mobile. And what we're going to do is we're going to post. We actually also have a Google Doc that we'd like to share with you that has the process in it. And we're going to post it in chat. You don't have to download it. If you'd rather just listen to the questions and then just answer it, that's a great way to do it, so that you're not kind of involved in looking at the questions. But we also just wanted to give you the opportunity to have this Google Doc post this event as well, so that you could do the process again with yourself after we complete today. But we'd ask from you once, if somebody could just let me know if you can do that. I just want to make sure that that Google Doc is okay. Great, thank you. Thanks so much. Love it. Thanks. Appreciate that, Linda and Marcy. If you could just make a copy of it though, and before you start putting in your responses, so that we don't see any of your responses, that would be great. So if you could just, with a show of hands, whether it's digital or visual, could you just let me know if you're ready to go? Because I don't want to start this without people being ready. Okay, 2 people have raised their hands. Hold on one sec. Great, thank you, Steph and Kristen. Great, so I think we're all good. Excellent. So what I'm gonna do first is we're gonna start with a centering, what we call a centering. And what that means is really the intention of the centering. It's kind of like a very, very mini meditation, I guess you could call it, but it's really the intention of it is for us to slow down so that we get kind of out of the busyness of our mind and move into a more presence with where we're at right now. Okay, so here we go. So first of all, you can just put your pen and paper aside for just a moment and just take a moment and just relax in your chair. Just kind of become aware of your body. And just through your own intention, just relax in the chair. If it helps to close your eyes at this point, that's great. You can close your eyelids and take in a nice deep breath in. And exhale. And you may just want to watch your breath, your inhalation, inhaling, and then exhaling, allowing yourself to just slow down and relax. Excellent. And now in this place of relaxation, just gently open yourself to receiving value from this process. You don't need to know what that is. Just open yourself to the possibility of receiving. Beautiful. And when you're ready, keeping that relaxed receptivity present, just open your eyes and then we'll begin the process. So first, identify something important to you that you had planned either in your professional or personal life that was postponed or canceled due to COVID-19. And you can just briefly jot that down. I'll give you a moment to write down your response to that. Okay, great. So if you had been successful, what would it have looked like? So if you want to add any more descriptions or details to how you would have seen it unfold and manifest. Okay, great. All right, beautiful. Now, putting that particular event aside, what was the deeper underlying purpose it was meant to serve? So in other words, what was your original intention to either serve yourself or others from this event or initiative? Okay, great. So you're noticing we're moving into kind of deeper levels. Now here's a deeper level. What was the inner experience that you would be having if that intention was fulfilled? So, for example, if that intention of service had been fulfilled, would you be experiencing joy or gratitude or an experience of fulfillment or enthusiasm, perhaps creativity? What would that inner experience be? And as you go into that space, just using your imagination, you can just move right into that space. Go ahead and reside now in the quality or qualities of that experience. So you can just, in your own consciousness, you can just move into that joy or that gratitude or that feeling of fulfillment. And if it's helpful, you can also go back to another time that you experienced that quality. That's a really nice way to do it as well. Just to let yourself go back into that experience and as best you can, just fully immerse yourself in that quality of experience. And as you're in that experience, just gently note what's going on inside for you. What are you feeling? What are you experiencing? Now, as you reside more fully in those qualities, ask yourself, if anything was possible, what other ways could I fulfill my original intention? And from that space, just allow whatever comes forward to emerge. There's no right or wrong. Just allow anything to show up. And it'll show up, it may be different for different people. It could be something visual, it could be something audio. You could see words or just pictures, or it could be even a feeling or a sense. Whatever shows up, just allow it to come forward. And we'll give you a couple of minutes just to reside with yourself and allow yourself to receive. All right. Now, keep in mind that process you can continue after this, when we complete this process. But go ahead now, and whenever you're ready, just bring that to completion for now. And acknowledge yourself for the willingness to let go of your preference and to allow the greater possibilities to emerge. And you know, that last little step, it seems like one that's just kind of a nice completion, but it's actually very important. In my work with others, one of the things that I find that people are very, that they just don't do enough is acknowledge themselves. And so I just want to encourage you, and this is just kind of a sidebar, as you work with anything you're doing, really create that habit of self-acknowledgement. Because first of all, the aspects in your consciousness you will begin to train, especially the ego, how to work more effectively with yourself as you acknowledge those parts when they're working more effectively. So that's the process. And as I said before, you have the handout. You can use this process, adapt it, take more time with it. Obviously, we didn't spend as much time as you could do if you were doing this with yourself. But that, and just so you know, that process you can use with any aspect of your life. So when you have a set of circumstances that feel limited or you feel challenged with them, you can work through that process through the lens of preference and purpose to support you in opening up to greater possibilities. And Kirk and I have used this multiple times with ourselves and with our own self, but also with great success with our clients. So just so you know, unfortunately, Kirk's internet went out. Talk about a perfect demonstration of preference and purpose right now. I can certainly say it was neither of our preference for him to suddenly have his internet go out mid webinar, but we'll just send him some good vibes and he'll come back as soon as he can. But right now, what we're going to do is we're going to take some Q&A, some live group sharing. So this is an opportunity for you to ask any questions about anything that we have talked about, or to even bring forward a particular issue or something that came forward in your own process that you would like further support in. So if you have a question, feel free to either just raise your hand visually or digitally raise your hand, and I'll unmute you, and then we can talk further. So does anybody have any brave individual have a question? Awesome. Okay, Chad, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Hello.
Hello.
So, without getting too specific, a part of what was postponed was some income, the financial part of these events that were canceled.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as, the feeling and that inner experience, money was not a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Which was great. And in fact, it was the opposite of that. But then I still have the question of, how do I pay my mortgage?
Sure. So what I'm hearing you say is tell me if I'm accurate, you had an awareness that when you moved into more of your authentic self, that the kind of that the pressure or that the impetus to make money really wasn't part of the deeper underlying purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
And legitimately, there's still the issue of I still need to, on a practical level, make money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you be open to sharing what was that experience inside yourself with regard to your purpose?
Sure. Do you want the whole process or just the experience?
Just the experience, like whatever you're called to share, really.
Sure. Well, maybe it helps just to kind of give you the full pictures. So I had about 6 art exhibitions get canceled on me
Mm-hmm.
this year, and obviously there's exposure, sales, income, security. It affords me a little. I can relax a little bit,
Sure.
and um, you know the the fact that I get to share art, evokes a lot of joy and compassion. A lot of my stuff is social impact related, so I feel like I'm spreading compassion, or there's some level of education, and so yeah, this idea of receiving validation, confidence, this sort of inner calmness, deeper creativity would allow me to go even deeper into my process. And I wrote down this phrase that I really like: radical radiance.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Because I really, when I'm in the zone, um, there's nothing that feels better than that. And so for me, when I allowed some space, I immediately went to give it away. I have all this art and just give it away. And then I started thinking, like, I don't need the system, to get my art out there. I can do an auction, I can do raffles, I can do, some guerrilla stunts or something to help that. So, like I said, none of those preferences for solutions, I guess, have income attached to that. And so I'm still a little nervous, I should say, about doing that.
Yeah, yeah, and that is also a very common experience with all of this, because it does, as we were talking about, the ego's job is to really keep us safe. So that your ego, of course, is going to be working in service to bringing, finding ways to bring in the money and all of that. And what I'm also hearing is that you've kind of opened up to a new level of possibility, and with that idea of the radiance and also giving it away. And sometimes this is, oftentimes this is a process of kind of going back into the well again and again. One of my suggestions is for you to kind of set out an intention to just see what comes in now over the next day or two. Like, keep your eyes open to what kind of signs along these ways, because oftentimes when we open up to this kind of thing, we are also setting out a message, a very powerful message that will be met. And it can be at times quite miraculous, to see what actually shows up. So when you were in that space, when you were in that deeper space of open to possibilities, what those were some of the things that came forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To me, what really had energy on it was the thing about give it away.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to you?
I mean, quite literally, yeah, I think it was just literally like gift it, gift the art, um, do art drops, around the city.
Wow.
I don't know.
Yeah, when I just kind of attune to that, there's something in there that seems to be a really powerful through line that could be worthy of greater exploration.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about that possibility, and part of me thinks if I give, the more you give, the more you get,
Mm-hmm.
sort of mentality. So yeah, I think in some ways, you have to give what you're lacking
Yeah.
in order to receive it. And so, at least leaning into that and seeing what the result might come of it, and not worry about not saying no, I guess, before I try it.
Yeah, yeah, good. That's really, really good awareness because we never know, it's kind of part of this whole life of purpose is kind of like crossing a river that we can only see the stepping stone, that the one or two stepping stones that are right in front of us. And so it's really a walk of faith in a way, or of experimentation, where you take that step and, like you're saying, just lean into it and see then what comes forward. And that may inform your next step and your next step and your next step.
Mm.
That's at least has been my experience with these kinds of things.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to share at this time?
No, I'd love to hear from some other folks.
Well, thank you for being brave enough to be our first, and I hope that was supportive for you.
Yes, thank you, Licia.
You bet. Okay, anyone else? Oh, hi, Kirk. Christian.
Everybody, would you believe it? The whole internet goes out, whole block, right? During that. So my apologies, but I'm back and
Kirk,
I'm using the phone.
I was saying that we very carefully orchestrated that as a demonstration of preference and purpose.
One quick thing I just want to add to Chad's, if that's okay. I know I came in late, but it's something you were going on. A way of also looking at it is that it is steps across the river that are appearing, but it's also understanding that that special thing is being created as we are doing that. It's not as the ego pictures things of, there it is, I'm going to get there. It's another metaphor I love is it's this process like holding a lantern over our heads in the forest at night, and we can see as far as the light goes, and the ego wants to say, let's not take any steps till we know exactly what's 200 yards ahead. But what actually works is we just say, I'm going to take a step in the direction where I feel the energy, like what you're just describing, the giveaway potentially. And then when we do that, the lantern moves with us, and all of a sudden we have a greater perspective that's being created by our stepping forward. So we keep stepping, our visibility, changes too, until finally we actually see we're in that which we were imagining. So it is being created, in the same time frame of now as we're making the lean-ins, and it's being directed by those steps too. So
Awesome. Christian, let's see, wait, I think I unmuted you. Okay, you're up.
There you go. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, good, thank you. So I was gonna build a little bit on Chad's experience, and Kirk, you hit right in the place that I was going, which is, there's this faith or trust in the creative process, or listening to that true self, more authentic self, and only having the next stepping stone appear after you've taken that leap, so to speak, or that next step. And I've been working with your book for a while now, and I was really happy to see this group come together so that we could talk. Kirk, you and I met several years ago when you were at Enzo, and you made an impact on me then. And your book came out, and so I've been sort of on the edges of these ideas for a while. So that I was there with Chad, and I think I would you know, as the logic, the logic side of me would say, Chad, you're probably onto something, and you should move in that direction. Where I got to next, Kirk, after your comments was, I think I've had a lot of success in living in, and Licia, you put it like the, you know, in that ego space, right? And in the sure-footedness and the, yeah, hey, I did everything right, you know, and it led to all the things that Chad, you're saying you hope this next step will lead to, which is, you know, I'm able to pay my mortgage, I'm able to support my family. And so now at the same time, something was unfulfilled, right? You get to that point, you're like, hey, those steps somehow led to a certain definition of success, but there's something more. And so I don't know if it's a strong, we characterize it as a strong ego, but I'm intrigued, and I keep trying to listen to that inner voice. I look for the innate joy and enthusiasm, but there's a shit ton of fear and what are you thinking, and why would you step away from this safer path? So I don't know. Again, I've been working daily for a while, but I didn't know if you had any sort of specific recommendations or comments on that real strong struggle, the desire to live a life of purpose and honor my true self is very, very strong. The inclination to do what's safe or to do what I've always done is almost equally as strong, and so there's a big conflict there that I'm trying to get through.
Yeah. Do you want to go, Licia?
No, go ahead. Go first.
I hear you, Christian, very well. And I have two questions. Like the first one is, I just curious, are you making the fear of that movement, are you making that fear wrong inside of you?
You know, I respect it, and I understand that I try to, like Licia said at the top of the call, I try to treat it with an open hand, and that metaphor analogy will help me. But I do think that I'm sorry, the question was I do give it strength. I do make it, I do judge it. You know, it's difficult to touch it lightly and say, oh, it's just an emotion that I'm feeling. It's my ego. And I know that I'm practicing doing that, but yes, it's still, I don't know if wrong is the right word, but again, it's maybe not wrong. I recognize it has value, but it's like, geez, that thing's a pretty big fear. It's hard to, it's hard to love it.
I hear you. And this is something Licia touched on in the beginning, which is to understand that it's okay to have that feeling, because not only is it okay for us, it's the beacon almost that says we're in the right direction, because, the world is kind of pulling us towards, one of the things that our calling is serving for us is the resolution of any kind of issues or misinterpretations or judgments that might be, as a part of our consciousness in being here, right? So the fear is almost like it's saying kind of, you're on the right track, and this emotion is okay, first of all, to say, oh, there is that's my ego trying to protect me because I'm kind of going in a new direction. A new direction has unknowns, and the ego isn't comfortable with unknowns. So my first thing would be, if that's present for you, to just become aware of it, and instead of pushing against the fear, just kind of lovingly accept it as a natural part of the process. Does that resonate at all for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because when we push, it's kind of like our fear is one log that's burning, right? We want to put out the fire. So we put in, I shouldn't feel fear, I should be evolved, or whatever it is. And that's throwing another log on, and then another log on. Pretty soon we have a bonfire instead of just a little thing we started with, right? So we start out in the beginning by just loving the fear and understanding it's a part of us, right? My next question for you is going to be, I heard you use the language, stepping away from what I'm doing now into that new thing. And it sounded like there may be a perception of it requires, you know, what this thing is requires me to abruptly leave whatever is currently sustaining me and step, you know, cut all the cords and boldly move into the new thing. Is that a paradigm that feels present?
Well, so I stepped away a bit from the safe path quite a while ago. And so I kind of jumped in. The way I characterize it is this: I decided, and I through a variety of different, probably ego and calling things, I went out on my own to forge my own path. And the way I've characterized it for months, which seems too long, is that I'm in a plane and I'm heading towards this cliff, and I honestly don't know on any given day how quickly I'll get to the cliff, and I don't know if I'm going to go over it or if I'll take off. But I'm going towards the cliff because for any number of reasons. So I think that it's not so much, you know, I'm a lawyer and I'm suddenly going to become, you know, a rock musician. I think you know, I've lived in the creative agency world, I've lived in high tech world, I've developed a certain set of skills that are valuable to the market. But I've compromised some of my true calling because of practicalities. And so, you know, when you step out on your own, and I often say, you know, first the pressure was, well, what do? You know, well, look, there's 5, you know, I read 5 books at a time. I've got like 5 different things going on. So to try to put me in one lane is hard. And so I spent a lot of time coming to being comfortable with saying I'm a little bit of a journeyman. I'm a little bit of a jack of all trades. I'm a little bit of a Swiss Army knife. I've done all kinds of things, you know, in my career. But landing that into, and I think this is where the preference, and I've been struggling with that. It's interesting this call is about that, because I've been struggling with the preference versus purpose for a while. And I still lean towards, this is the way it should be. I should be using the skills that I've been acknowledged for. You know, I'm a good account manager. I'm a good client manager. I thrive in environments where I've brought into an agency and somebody gives me a client, I can grow that to multi-million-dollar business. But I'm not a hustler. I'm not a sales guy. And I don't mean to disparage that. I'm using those words. I'm not the person to go out and kind of find opportunities. And so I've kind of gone, hey, you know, stepping stone, things will come if I continue to do the things like Chad, you know, if I continue to create my work and do the things that I think that I would do anyway, or that I feel like I need to do anyway, whether I'm being paid for them or not, that eventually, right, there'll be wind beneath my wing, and I'll start to take flight. But it's been a pretty grueling process.
I hear you. You know, it's something that, and let me just kind of reflect back to something I heard and let me know if it's accurate or not. There was a point in there where I felt like there was some judgment on the needing to sometimes look at the practicality, like the practicality aspect of living and sustainment, like to choose that is somehow wrong in this context of going to purpose, whatever. Is there a little bit of that there?
There is, and I've had a couple instances where I go, oh, this is serendipity or synchronicity coming into play. But I struggle with, should I be stepping into this because I'm good at it, or should I be listening to, like there's no joy and enthusiasm in the step, but am I stepping out of my comfort zone to go that way? I don't know. I don't want to get too deep into the.
What I'm just kind of going at is, rarely in this world have I seen it where it's kind of like someone is here one day and then across the chasm the next day. It's usually a process of ramping down from one aspect of life and ramping up into another. And so it's important not to judge the aspect of us that says, you know, from a practical perspective, for instance, I'm going to keep doing freelance or whatever it is as I begin to also lean into these different avenues that the universe seems to be opening up to me, right? That it isn't, like, I think your word was a compromise. It's not a compromise. it's it's an understanding that, isn't it great that I have these skills that enable me to sustain while I then begin to create and build a ramp into where I'm going, and to just lovingly accept that as part of the process. Is that helpful?
I think that's very helpful. I think the validation I think there's validation there that it's a common thing, and I think stepping into the whole, and I see somebody's commenting about surrender, the surrender thing, just allowing it, not judging it, is an area I can focus on for sure. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, has this been helpful?
Oh, very, extremely helpful. Yeah. I don't want to take it. There's more questions. Yeah, I want to make sure we have time for someone else.
Christian, I just want to also add that in the book, since you have it, there is I think it's in chapter 4, where you can work at a deeper level with those parts of you that are in upset, emotional upset. So I just encourage you to utilize that process, which is really a process of treating those aspects of ourselves who are activated, those aspects of the ego, even as like little children. So how would you treat a little kid who was fearful, with a lot of compassion, a lot of comforting and nurturing? So you can just refer to that process as well.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you so much.
The book has been extremely helpful.
Great.
Quite, and you'll get a letter one day.
It's good to see you again,
Extremely impactful. Yeah, you too, Kirk.
Awesome. So I wish that we had more time. This is always the lament. And, when we organized this and we said, oh, can we have an extra half hour? Normally, I know that you all just have an hour for these series. We negotiated for an extra half hour so that we could have some more of this. And just so you know, Kirk and I are very open. If you want to reach out to us, we are happy to do that. Kirk's already put his email address. Let me also put my email address in there as well. Happy to continue the conversation with you all.
Please feel free to reach out and have, if there's any question or some feedback or some guidance you're looking for, reach out to either of us. We'd be more than happy to have a conversation about it.
And so we're just really, really grateful that we had the opportunity to connect with you all. And also, Christian mentioned the book. We wanted to give you also a link to that in case you wanted to get a little bit more understanding of the work that we do. What we did today was just one relatively small piece in terms of the methodology that we teach. And just so you know, that link, you can get it on Amazon, but that link gives you a special 50% off, as well as some bonus courses and things like that for you. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much, Kirk and Licia. Thank you for sharing your perspective and your guidance and your advice. I know I got a lot out of it. I'm sure that everybody else did as well. And thank you all for who attended today. Please join us next week for our continuing webinar series. We're going to have media leaders discussing the effects of this time we're in on brands and consumers in the market, and discussing where we go from here. And you can register for upcoming webinars and other events, as well as learn more about our mission at ThinkLA to serve the community at thinkla.org. Again, I encourage you to donate to Ad Relief at adrelief.org, which helps the advertising, marketing, and media community in times of crisis like this. Again, thank you all for being here. Major thanks to Kirk and Licia. We hope to see you next week at Think Thursday. Please take care, everyone, and please stay safe.
Thank you
all.
everybody.
Really appreciate you. Bye-bye.